Hello, friends. It's Lisa Williams, Chief Inspiration Officer here at Perfect Side Gigs. Welcome back to our interview series, Corporate to Entrepreneur. We are having so much fun hearing from the experts that have made the leap themselves into this amazing world of business building and entrepreneurship and helping others do the same. I'm so excited for our next guest, Mr. Ty Bennett, coming out of Utah. So Ty is actually one of kind of an individual that we haven't heard from because he never really thought about working for someone else. At age 21, he's built a business with his brother, a direct sales company that he grew to over 20 million in revenue. He since has moved on to form Leadership Inc., which is a training and speaking company. He's a prolific author and world-renowned speaker and a busy father of four to boot. Ty, we are so happy to have you on our show. Thank you for joining us.
No, absolutely. It's fun to sit down and talk to you.
Absolutely. So we're going to just dive right in. You speak to a lot of organizations about leadership. Yeah. And I love a question that you asked. I don't know I think it was a couple years back. You asked this group of leaders, why in the world would someone follow you? Mm-hmm. And I think as a business builder, if you're thinking about doing this for a living, that's really an important question. And I'm curious, what kind of leader do you think you need to be? And what advice would you give for people around that?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question for all of us to consider. And actually where that came from, for me, I sat next to a woman on an airplane at one point, and I was wearing, I think, t-shirt, shorts, and flip-flops. I was headed to Orlando, and just that's what I wore on the plane that day. And as I sat down, she asked me what I did, and I said, I'm a keynote speaker. I'm speaking at this conference tomorrow. And then she kind of looked me from head to toe, and she asked me very bluntly, she said, why in the world would anyone hire you to speak to them? And the interesting thing, though, is I think that's kind of the question for all of us, right? It's whether you're a speaker or a business builder, a leader in sales, whatever it is, like, why would somebody be influenced by you? Why would they do business with you? What is it that makes you stand out? And I think as we talk about entrepreneurship, obviously, I think we need to have a clear plan and have either a great product or service that we're offering, something that can enhance people's lives. Ultimately, I think we're all selling the same thing. We're all selling a better world, whatever that looks like, right? So if my speech makes your world better, that's what I'm offering, right? If this program makes people think a little bit better, that's what we're offering. If a book, if a product, a service, it's to enhance somebody's world. So I think that has to be there, but it goes beyond that because we buy people first, right? Just this conversation as an example, you reached out to me, or through my team reached out to me, and I thought the idea sounded great. And you and I had a preliminary call, and I thought, this lady's awesome. She's trying to help the world. She's trying to do good things. I buy you first. Like, that's just how life works, right? And so we have to be able to have that confidence and that ability to connect with people, and the ability to engage people around some of those things and show them that we're not just in it for ourselves, but we actually want to add value and bring something to the table. And the beauty of all of that is I think those are skills that can be learned, because you may be listening going, I'm not great at that, right? Like, that's not my natural skill set. But we can, as entrepreneurs, we can do that in multiple ways. One, we can develop those skills, and two, we can surround ourselves with the right team that can help do that too. So I think there's a lot of ways around it, but it's a great question for us to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you're a father of four.
Mm-hmm. Our fifth.
Oh my goodness. Are you serious? Good for you guys.
Or crazy. I don't know if it's, most people are like, I don't know if that's good, but we enjoy them. They're great. So
are you gonna keep it even? Are you gonna have another after this?
I was really done at 4, and then we felt a strong feeling we were supposed to have another. So I hope we're done at 5.
Yeah. God's plan is good, whatever it is. I know. So actually, gosh, I have a couple directions I could go because you gave me a lot there. I want to ask you, so we talked a little bit about your background and not ever really wanting to work for someone else. I think there's actually a lot of people that start that way, and then they go to college, they get a job, and they sort of give up on their dreams in some ways. What can you say to those people about, the joy that they would find if they found that bravery again, if you will?
Yeah. Well, and that's maybe a benefit to me that I didn't go down that road. And, I think it varies with different people in their situation. But, sometimes I've watched people who would be great entrepreneurs. They're very successful, but because of that, they're successful in the corporate world, and they kind of have those golden handcuffs, right? Where they make great money and have great benefits, and there's nothing wrong with that, but they maybe want something else, and it's hard to step out of that and walk away, right? When I started as a 21-year-old entrepreneur, I had no living expense. Like, I didn't have to make a ton of money the first month to get our business going and to even, support my family or anything like that, because they didn't exist yet. So yeah, I think there's some benefit from that. But I also think that one of the things that I see one distinction I would make between, and I'll put them in two categories: entrepreneurs and leaders, which I'm putting in the same category, and those who seem to get lost in the corporate world, where, right, they're doing their job, but that's about it. One big distinction between those two groups is that the entrepreneurs and the leaders, they have this insatiable desire to learn and to grow. They keep studying, they keep listening to podcasts, they keep reading, they keep wanting to develop their skills, they want to do more. And honestly, anybody who's watching this program would fit that category, because somehow you decided that this was worth time to explore, right? I think that's one of those things that keeps us in that spot of humility and growth and engagement with life, that we want to find ways to contribute, but it also keeps our mind curious and thinking about different ideas and opportunities. And because of that, helps to develop that entrepreneurial mindset. I think it's learned curiosity. I think for all of us, like, I find entrepreneurs' minds are they're constantly going, and you can develop that, right? Because we all have times we don't want to, but you put in that work and make it part of who you are.
Mm-hmm. I think I love that you talked about that curiosity. Where, for those of you watching this later, we're in the midst of the COVID-19, epidemic right now, and God be with the families that are impacted. But we've been through adversity before. We've seen downturns in our economy before. There's going to be innovation and companies that are created out of this. What can you say to those people that are not using this time to their advantage right now to wake them up?
Well, unfortunately, we can't be with people to shake them and go, okay, let's do this. But I do think, like you said, I mean, the mother of innovation is crisis. It's challenge. It's when we face something that we've never faced before, and we have no alternative. I've seen that in my business. I mean, just some simple things, not like earth-shattering things, but for the last, 10 years speaking, I am really busy. Like, I speak 100 plus times a year, which is awesome, but I also want to be at home with my kids. And I've written 4 books in that time frame and working on my 5th. So there's always that project. I host a podcast. I write a weekly blog. Like, there's a lot going on. Well, for years, I've thought about creating a digital course that I could use on the back end to share my content in different ways. I just never created the time or said, okay, I'm really going to do this. Well, that was one of the first things. As soon as our world kind of shut down, I went, all right, now I'm going to do this. And that's jumped me into this creation mode of something that I just put off or never decided to do. I think so many of us have those opportunities, right? I think we need to take advantage of it. And taking advantage of it could mean business taking advantage of it. It could also mean that you have a unique time with your kids that you will probably never have again in your lifetime. right? I mean, literally, Lisa, we're recording this at noon my time. This has been my morning so far. I woke up and I worked out. I rode 10 miles on my Peloton to my own workout in my basement. Then I came upstairs. I went and took my oldest daughter and went and played soccer with her. She's getting ready to try out for the soccer team if we have soccer ever again. I don't know, but so we went and did that. I came home. I went and ran 2 miles with my boys, and then as soon as I got home, I went and walked 4 miles with my wife and ran home from there a little bit early. Showered, jumped right here, and now we're having this conversation. Right? That I'll never have that time like that again. Like.
Right.
And so some of it is just taking advantage with the situation that it is. I'm a big believer that you make the most of the situation. Now, does that mean that we don't have stresses and things? For sure. My business turned upside down very quickly. And to be fair, I dealt with some stresses the first couple of weeks and going, okay, that's a lot of revenue we just lost. This is changing. How do we deal with this? And trying to figure some of those out. And I wasn't perfect in dealing with some of that. Luckily, I have a wife that, is awesome and can help me through it. But once we kind of settled in, we went, okay, this is what it is. That's part of dealing with challenge is you face reality and you go, this is what it is. You don't wallow in like, I wish this were different. I wish I could change this. You focus on what you can control. And so for us, it was downtime. I could be more creative in creating some new products and things for my business. And we could spend much more time as a family doing certain things that we enjoy. My kids, as we talked about it, they're involved in sports that are kind of shut down right now. And so we talked about right now when most kids are not going to be training and doing stuff, what do you want to do? Do you want to give yourself an advantage, right? Like, because coming out of it, my 2 boys, they compete in Ninja Warrior, American Ninja Warrior.
Fun.
And they're awesome. So we're hoping, as soon as these competitions come back, right? If they're training every day, they're going to be ready to go and improving where other kids may not be, right? My daughter, same thing. I was like, Andy, you've got soccer tryouts at the end of this thing. So you're not playing a spring season. So what do you want to do to be prepared for that? What does that look like? So she's running every day and we're playing soccer every day. And just, I think all of us have that in our own little space, in our own little world of how are we improving? What are we working on? And that's within our control right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Our kids are one of the biggest reasons I'm doing this. I was in corporate America myself for 22 years. And when I would counsel people, I've been recruiting. And when I would counsel people about their kids, I would say, instead of asking them what they want to be when they grow up, ask them what kind of lifestyle they want to live. And I'm curious about your parents, like what was it that made you and your brother get this brave idea to go out and build this business? And what can that, do for other parents?
So that's a great question. I really, and it's interesting because as you said that, I have that conversation with my kids. And my parents had that conversation, I don't know that they asked that question, but so I grew up in a home where my dad did very well financially, but he wasn't an entrepreneur. He worked for someone else. And there were restrictions to that where he didn't have total control over his time, right? Mm-hmm. He worked hard, provided a great living. And even when he traveled, we had great relationship. I remember, he'd call in every night and we'd talk on the phone or whatever the situation was. But we lived in a nice area where we were around a lot of entrepreneurs. And, some we got to know through church, some were parents, friends of, my friends' parents and different things. And I was always kind of entrepreneurial driven. And so I had some of those conversations with my own parents, but I also had conversations with some of these adult friends that were great mentors for me too. And we talked about lifestyle. I could see some of the differences, right? Like we went on I remember a specific family vacation that we went on, and the other dad was an entrepreneur and he was there with us the whole time. And my dad had to leave somewhere in the middle of that trip, right? Just things like that you start to pay attention to, you start to see. Because lifestyle for me, that's a big factor in why I want to be an entrepreneur, so that I have flexibility in that. And everybody finds their own version of normal and what reality looks like, because I travel quite a bit, but then when I'm home, I'm home. And so, it's just a different way of approaching it. But we also have a lot of time to spend together and be on vacation or whatever it is that we like to do. Um, I like that you brought this up with kids, because I'm a huge believer, not just in teaching kids an entrepreneurial mindset, but that the entrepreneurial mindset is going to be required for them to be successful in the world that they're coming into.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think they have to be able to think on their feet. Think they have to be able to see problems and look at them as opportunities and say, okay, how do I find solutions for that? I think they have to understand how to connect with and move and motivate people. Right? It's just going to be a requisite skill set, because so more and more, there's so many jobs that are going to be replaced by technology, that just technical skills are only going to take us so far. And so I think that more and more that's going to become the reality of what we deal with.
I so agree. My heritage has been in technology and financial services my whole career. And I've seen this where people, technology comes in and they get left behind, they've outsourced it or what have you. But there's some people like you that take that adversity and they push past it and they get better. I mean, what is it, do you think, about business builders like you that are different?
Well, I don't know if it's different is an interesting word. I think we think differently, but I don't think that it's something that we're born with. I think it's something that's developed. And
Mhm.
so I think anybody can. I think that so this is just an interesting, I'm developing a speech right now so my boys who competed in Ninja Warrior, it's a fun sport, it's cool to watch. They're both very good, like both ranked in the top 10 nationally. Like they love it. I'm developing a speech that I'm gonna actually have them on stage doing some ninja with me as I'm giving the speech, which will just be fun to do with them. But the premise of it is I want to use ninja as a metaphor to talk about the relationship that each of us have with failure, with fear, and with focus.
Mm.
And in answer to your question, I think that entrepreneurs, their relationship with those three things are unique.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they understand failure in a way that most people don't, because to succeed as an entrepreneur, you fail, and you fail constantly. And that's not like you fail and you had to start over. That maybe that you start a business, it doesn't work or whatever. But even within the business, I mean, for me to speak 100 times a year, I get turned down for 400, 500, 600 speeches every year, right? I have emails in my inbox from my agent every day that says, oh, they went with this speaker instead of you. They went with, right? Failure is part of life. It happens constantly. And so I've learned that the emotions don't have to rise and fall with every situation, but I've also learned how to learn from it. Anytime somebody chooses a different speaker, the first thing I do is pull up that speaker's website. I'm looking at what did the client see about them that they said they're better than choosing him, right? And so I'm tweaking and I'm trying to learn and develop. And sometimes I'm like, oh, that actually is way better. Sometimes I'm baffled. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't get what happened there. But you're just trying to learn from it. The intensity of focus, the relationship you have with focus to get the job done, to push through at whatever cost that is. I'm a big fan of the quote, when you're interested, you do what's convenient, but when you're committed, you do whatever it takes.
Mm.
Entrepreneurs understand that to their core. It is not like, this is a nice idea. Oh, if this works out, if it works within this time frame, it is like you get the job done. And then facing fear, and especially for men, I don't think that we even talk about it as fear, but that little hesitation that you have, like, I don't know if I want to make that phone call, or like there is fear in this because we're stepping out into the unknown, right? We're taking that little leap of faith every time you talk to somebody new, every time you put your idea out in the universe, every time you reach out to somebody who to invest, every time, like there is so much that you're dealing with fear on a constant basis. So I think the relationship around those three, in answer to your question, this was a very long-winded version, I apologize. I think that we, in part because of just doing it, have developed a relationship that is different in terms of how we focus, how we deal with our fear, and how we overcome failure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think you touched on, fear of failure. And I think what's unique about people like you is you do fail, but you get over it quickly. There's that mental toughness that you've developed. Talk to us a little bit about that. But more importantly, I want to talk about people develop those same skills in corporate America, but for some reason they don't think they can translate to something for themselves and their own families.
No, absolutely. They develop in corporate America. They develop it in sports. They develop in all sorts of things. Like I can give you an example from my brother's life. So when he was a freshman in high school, he decided to go out for wrestling. Never wrestled before, thought it was an interesting sport. Honestly, I have no idea why he decided to do it. The lowest weight class was 103 pounds. He weighed 92 pounds. He was tiny, right? So he's giving up 10% of his body weight. He's never wrestled. He was horrible. He got destroyed. Like literally every match his freshman year, he got pinned. Every match. He didn't win once. He didn't lose by points. He got pinned every time. I remember driving 3 hours to watch him and he was pinned in like 17 seconds. My mom was like, come on. Like, it was just like, I mean, and he would, half of the time he would get pinned, he would cry after, like he just wanted it. Right. But he was horrible. He was not good at it. Right. And at the end of his freshman year, my mom was so sick of it. She hated it. She hated watching him suffer. She hated him coming home bruised, and like, she just didn't like it. She literally went to the bank, got $500 in cash. And when he walked in from his very last practice, she handed him $500 and said, if you quit wrestling, this is yours.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
And he looked at her and he said, no, I'm going to keep wrestling. Okay. So I remember watching this as the younger brother, like, he just gave him $500, like, yeah. So he keeps wrestling. His sophomore year, not amazing, but better. He wins some matches. He actually weighed 103 pounds, so that helped. Then his junior year, like he finishes his junior year at like winning districts, going into his senior year ranked as one of the top wrestlers in the state, like total transformation, right? What I didn't know is that there was a senior in high school, a friend of ours, who drove him home from wrestling every day. This senior, as he dropped him off very last practice, right before he walks in to get the $500 from my mom, this senior goes, Scott, I want you to know that this year I almost quit multiple times. And every time I almost quit, I looked over and I saw you working your guts out in practice. And you are my inspiration. You're the reason that I kept wrestling. So thank you.
Oh, I love that.
So then he walks in and my mom asks him to quit. And he's like, I'm not quitting. Like, I'm an
no.
right? Like, there's no way. So later in life, he and I start a business together. It goes on to be very successful. My mom runs into his wrestling coach. This is 10 plus years later, right? And his wrestling coach is like, hey, tell me about what Scott's up to. And she's like, you know what? He's a super successful entrepreneur. He's built this business and he's married. He has a family. And his wrestling coach goes, he learned that in wrestling.
Doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
He learned how to push through. Like, we learn that lesson in so many things. It doesn't have to be entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. Like, I point this out to my kids all the time. I'm like, when my boys fail at Ninja, I'm like, good, you failed. Are you dead? You going to be okay? Okay, get up and do it again. Like, just keep, like, that's the process, right? I think we've all had some of those. I think you're right. We classify certain things and we think it has to be in this realm. Like, and I think principles are principles. They're so universally applicable. I think that we learn those in a lot of ways. I can tell you, for me, one of the places I learned how to deal with failure is I served a mission for my church. For 2 years, I went and taught people. I knocked on doors to talk to people about my beliefs. I got doors slammed in my face constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it was just part of the deal. Like it didn't affect me that, like every once in a while, somebody like scream at you and you're like, well, that was rough. Like what, or something, but you just kind of push through. And so jumping into business, when we would like reach out and we put together call sheets or whatever, and we're calling, you call 100 people and 100 people say no, you're kind of like, that's part of the deal. Like it just wasn't, I just didn't overthink it. And maybe that was because I was young and naive, or like it just didn't sting that bad. I can think of certain times it has. I can think of certain ones that stung. And even in business later now, like there's certain gigs that I'm like, I want that speech so bad. And like, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But ultimately you just keep moving forward. And part of that is the process that you build momentum, right? But momentum is only built with consistency.
Right. Yeah.
And I think all too often we take those big swings and we think, I'm going to knock it out of the park, but it's not. It's those singles constantly. It's just like bunting the ball over and over and over again. And that builds that momentum that keeps moving forward.
I want to ask you kind of a personal question. I was asleep for a long time. I got to a point in my career of great success. I think a lot of people do. And I was kind of coasting. And then I failed big time. And I think a lot of people face this. And I started kind of listening. For me, it's my Heavenly Father. I think a lot of people, they have this idea that they're meant to do something more. But at some point, it's like they write, 8 chapters in their book, and then they just stop. I mean, what can you tell me about what has driven you? Is there a faith component to your life? Some people, it's Allah, Jesus, just human goodness, hope. Can you tell me about that? And how often do you have to redirect around that voice that's talking to you? That was a long question. Sorry.
No, I think that's awesome. I think too many people fall asleep, and it's interesting that the way you brought that up is sometimes that happens when we're successful, right? It's just working. It's like we become complacent, and it's just not hard. And so, which is a great thing. You worked yourself to that point, but we do need to be engaged, right? We need to feel that, to feel alive. For me, I very much rely on my faith. I'm Christian, and I believe in a God who, I believe he's our Father, which also makes all of us connected as siblings. I think we need to support each other. We need to be there for each other. But I also grew up with parents that there's a phrase out of scripture that they repeated often to me in particular, or I don't know if they did with my siblings, but I remember them talking about the idea that where much is given, much is required. And, I grew up in a great home. I grew up in an affluent situation. I had opportunities. I think I've been given some talents that I could use, and I knew that I needed to try and work on and enhance those talents to be able to use those. But I also fundamentally believe that all of that is for us to do good in the world and support each other. I think that's why we're here. I think I'm a big believer that we're here to become more like our Heavenly Father, more like a perfect being, whatever that looks like to you, which means that process of growth and refinement and constantly learning and trying to trim off those rough edges, that's what this life is, right? And I don't know how far to go, but a long ways to go. But I do think it's good to come back to some of those things on a regular basis, right? And have those habits in our life. And even when we have those habits, there's times that, like for me, I read scriptures every day. That's part of my routine. There's times that I'd be lying if I didn't say it just became routine. and I wasn't engaged in it the same way, right? Or prayer or meditation or personal development or any of those things, right? That even if you're doing it, sometimes you're asleep. Sometimes you're like you're not getting anything out of it. And so we need to find some of those things that engage us and inspire us. And, for me, we had built a successful business, and I felt this calling to do more, to write and to speak. It probably wasn't like the smartest financial decision I've ever made. But I don't know how to describe it other than to say, this is what I feel like I'm supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so even like in the last 2 months when this crisis hit, and, for all intents and purposes, my world for live events doesn't exist right now, right? It's not an option. And I think it'll come back. I don't know when, and I don't know how effective, like how fast it will, but I don't have this plan B. Like, I'm not running to go get a job. I am, this is what I'm doing. This is what I want to do. This is how I want to serve the world. And so, yeah, for me, it's been, okay, then how do I build something more? How do I take advantage of it? How do we add a virtual component to what we do? How do I get in front of people that I can't be physically in front of? How do I serve them? And so we're exploring all those things and trying to do the best we can. But yeah, for me, my faith defines who I am more than anything else. So I appreciate you asking that question. Because of that, and here's where I think it becomes very real from a principle standpoint, is it's helped me define my values. So I clearly know who I am, who I want to be, and because of that can make the decisions that align with who I'm supposed to be. I think there's a huge component of being comfortable in your own skin, that connects with people, that it feels true, even if those people don't see things the way you do, or right, you and I could have very different beliefs, but you seem authentic to me. And I think it's because you understand who you are and what you're about. And that I think is a huge piece of this entrepreneurial journey for those who make it, is they understand themselves at a different level. And maybe that's because they have to dig deep to get through some of these things and figure it out. But I think that's one of the keys that faith brings into my life too.
Mm-hmm. I have a business partner and mentor in life. His name's Ed Milet, and he talks about becoming the person that God intends for you to be. And he talks about meeting your twin in heaven when you get there instead of a stranger. And I personally, Ty, I'm just so grateful to have met you. And I'm going to love getting to know you more and who that person you're meant to be on this journey. I can't believe we are almost out of time. We are out of time, actually. Oh my goodness, you have been brilliant. I know that you had a complimentary gift that you wanted to offer our audience. Can you tell them about that?
Yeah, so I've written a few books, and one of those, The Power of Influence, I want to give a copy to anyone who is interested. I think influence is such a key component for any entrepreneur, but it will help you in the corporate space too. I speak to corporations about this all the time. We're all in the people business, I think, fundamentally. And so being able to connect with and engage with people, the book is full of strategies on how to do that and how to be more effective in that. So yeah, we'll offer a free digital download of that book, and anybody who's interested can read it.
Okay, awesome. Well, bless you in your ninja warrior extravaganza and creativity of minds. You're going to have, I can't wait to see what you create out of this quarantine in your life. But to our audience, I thank you so much for joining us. I hope this has provided value to you. Make sure you tune in next time to our Corporate to Entrepreneur series, where we are just so blessed to hear from all these people that are making a difference in other people's lives. Bless you all in your life journey, and we will see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye, Ty.